Miranda twirled in front of the mirror in the fitting room of a wedding salon, trying on one wedding dress after another and admiring each one. She felt like a princess from a fairy tale. She had never even dared to dream about such a beautiful dress. The young woman smiled to herself and dreamily thought, "How lucky I am! My Jason is the best. It's really impossible to find anyone like him in a million years. He's rich, an athlete, kind and responsive. Since I was born, I felt I was haunted by an evil fate, but now I am so happy, as if he were an award for everything I have been through." Miranda was an orphan. Her mother didn't die or get sick. Nothing bad happened to her. She gave birth to a daughter and abandoned her, without even looking at her or giving her a name. So right from the maternity hospital, the little girl first ended up in the house for babies, and then in the orphanage. Throughout her childhood, Miranda harbored resentment towards her mother. She couldn't understand why she was even born if she wasn't wanted. How could her mother so callously abandon her own child, never think of her, and live peacefully? Life in the orphanage was certainly not easy for Miranda. She didn't see life beyond those bleak government walls at all. She had to fight with older kids. Sometimes they took her lunch, stole her things, and constantly teased her. Probably Miranda wouldn't have survived alone. She would have broken down. But she had a best friend, Grace. Like Miranda, Grace was also an orphan. Her mother died in a drunken stupor. The girls stuck together, and it was easier to learn and fight back together. They even looked very similar, both with long blonde hair and neat little noses. Many people considered Miranda and Grace sisters. When Grace was 9 years old, she was even wanted to be adopted, but she refused to go to a new family without Miranda. The friends loved to sit on the windowsill, dangling their legs down, and dream that someday they would leave this horrible place, fall in love with handsome princes, and be the happiest. The girls understood each other with half a word. They shared intimate secrets, sorrows and grievances, making life a little easier for both of them. Once, when Miranda was in 7th grade, they were taken to the river to swim. This was a real event for orphanage children who had seen almost nothing beyond the shelter. However, no one warned them that the current was very fast and there were whirlpools. The friends decided to swim to the other side for lilies, which lured them with their beauty, although it was strictly forbidden. Moreover, the girls weren't perfect swimmers, but it seemed to them that the river wasn't that wide and that they could manage it together. In the middle of the river, Miranda suddenly had a cramp in her leg. She started screaming and flailing, panicking heavily, and began to drown. The other children panicked too and didn't know what to do, as many of them couldn't swim at all. While the frightened caregiver jumped into the water and swam to save the girls, Grace also rushed to help. Grace was somehow able to raise Miranda to the surface, and she grabbed onto a log, desperately gasping for air and spitting out water, coughing heavily. But unfortunately, Grace didn't survive. She was carried away by the turbulent current straight into the whirlpool. Grace's body was never found. The loss of her friend became a terrible blow for Miranda. She screamed wildly at her funeral and blamed herself for her death because, in fact, it was. After that tragedy, Miranda was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she was treated with strong medications that barely brought her back to herself. She became sad, quiet and thoughtful, and very withdrawn. Even the boys began to be afraid of her, considering her crazy. After leaving the orphanage, Miranda, as a full orphan, was given a tiny apartment in a crowded apartment building. During her stay at the shelter, The girl had seen many broken, maimed fates. The girls became night fairies and were simply used by anyone who wanted to, while the boys sank to the bottom, injected illegal stuff and smoked prohibited substances or drank heavily. Many of them were already in juvenile detention centres for theft, which was a common thing at the orphanage. But Miranda firmly decided for herself that she would not repeat their fate, and despite everyone, especially her mother who had abandoned her, she would make it in life and become a person. Miranda managed to get a job as a waitress in a small, cosy restaurant. The owner took pity on the poor orphan and took her on a probationary period. The job itself was easy, and the girl coped well with her duties. However, it was much harder to learn to get along with people and always be in a good mood. After all, children who have been through the orphanage often become disoriented and have difficulty adapting to the modern world. Miranda received great help from her partner Polly. At first, Polly was surprised that an unsociable person like Miranda could work as a waitress. After all, it was necessary not only to quickly serve dishes, but also to communicate effectively, get along well, and please the customers. But she decided to help her. "Miranda, dear, this won't work. You'll scare off all the regular customers. Why do you look disgruntled as if you drank vinegar? You're young and pretty, so use it. Carry the tray, relax, smile. Think of something good. You'll see, the tips will be bigger and the customers will come more often." The girl sighed sadly. "That's the problem. There's never been anything good in my life since birth. I'm an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, humiliated, and my friend died because of me. The flat they gave me is terrible, full of holes and cracks, no repairs for 100 years. Where can I find anything good here? Besides, I'm used to expecting only a catch from other people. I know you're right, I need to change, but I don't understand how to do it." Polly shook her head. "Well, your fate is certainly not enviable, but you know, if you keep thinking about bad things, they'll keep coming to you. Look, the room is bad, that's a minus, but not paying rent is a plus. Let me help you. I'll come on weekends, we'll put up fresh wallpaper. I have some unnecessary curtains and a couple of blankets. We'll create comfort. It will be better. And you dream about a good groom. Imagine what he'll be like. You'll see, and you'll smile. Don't be down." Gradually, thanks to her colleague, Miranda began to loosen up, smile and actively communicate with customers. Polly helped her bring the room to a divine look, and the girl's life began to improve gradually. She often imagined what her long-awaited prince would be like, tall, slim, with kind eyes and strong arms. Miranda dreamed of swirling around in a waltz, and he would kiss and hug her. And one beautiful day, a miracle happened, and the prince from her dreams came to the restaurant to have lunch. Miranda's heart immediately beat wildly, and she brought him lunch with a dazzling smile. The guy smiled back and winked. "Hey, beauty, you must help me urgently. It's a matter of life and death." Naive Miranda took everything seriously and asked in a frightened voice, "Of course I'll help you. What happened? Are you feeling unwell? We have a first aid kit in the kitchen. Shall I get it?" The guy smiled even wider and replied, "Yes, Cupid's arrow just pierced my heart. I'll die on the spot if I don't get your phone number. My name is Jason. And yours?" Miranda blushed up to her ears and replied, "I'm Miranda. Very nice to meet you, but why do you need my phone number, if it's not a secret?" Jason honestly answered, "I want to invite you to the movies tonight. Will you come?" So the couple started dating. Jason was very tactful, gallant and gentle. They passionately kissed, walked around the city at night, and couldn't stop talking. Miranda immediately understood for herself. Jason was the one and only for life, because it was so warm, calm and good for them together. At first the girl was a little wild, shy about everything. She didn't know how to behave at the theatre or exhibition, because no one taught her anything, in fact. But Jason was very tactful and patient. He slowly, gently and calmly opened up an entirely different world for Miranda. It turned out there was so much interesting around. Stuff around. Only one thing worried her. "Jason, what will your parents think of me? A poor orphan without money or education? After all, you're from a family of businessmen. They'll probably be against it." Jason hugged his beloved tighter and encouraged her. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. My father is a man of the world. He started from scratch himself, grew up in a disadvantaged family, achieved everything himself and worked hard. He also took a wife from a simple family, Mum from the village. That's how it is. Dad can't stand all this glamorous crowd and high society. He loves simple and honest people, so you'll definitely please my parents." And it happened. Miranda went to visit them and trembled like an aspen leaf. But from the doorstep she was welcomed warmly and soulfully. To her surprise, the huge house was furnished expensively, with taste, but without excess pomposity. Jason's father was a grey-haired, intelligent man with a neat beard, and his mother was dressed in a simple but elegant suit, and she had a minimum of makeup. There was no false eyelashes or artificial nails in sight. Miranda wanted to do something nice and baked a Napoleon cake herself, but she was afraid that she would be ridiculed, because such rich people were probably used to eating only different delicacies. All in all, the dinner went great. At the end of the evening, Miranda helped Jason's mother clean up and wash dishes, which completely won her heart over. She said, "You will be a good daughter-in-law. You aren't afraid of housework. I respect that. I'm the same way. As you can see, we don't have any servants, even though we could afford it financially. But my husband and I believe that family is a quiet and cozy haven where there is no place for outsiders. The man's job is to earn money and be the provider, and the woman's job is to maintain the warmth of the home, be a homemaker, understand and support her spouse. I see that you are a good, modest girl, and I am at ease with my son being with you. I think we'll get along." After 6 months of courtship and passionate dates, Jason proposed to Miranda. The girl was over the moon with happiness and immediately agreed. And today was the unforgettable and important day. She was getting married. The newlyweds came out of the church, and a gold wedding ring gleamed on their fingers. They got into a fancy white limousine and were about to leave when suddenly a little girl about 7 years old knocked on the car window. She was so thin and poorly dressed that it brought tears to Miranda's eyes. She shyly handed over a small but beautiful bouquet of camomiles and asked, "Ma'am, would you like to buy it for happiness? It's not expensive, only $2. Miranda couldn't resist and bought the bouquet, giving the girl the money from her wallet. Suddenly, Miranda noticed her braids. There were special braids, with colourful ribbons, very intricate, beautiful and sophisticated. Only one person in the world could braid hair like that, her drowned friend Grace. No matter how much Miranda tried, she couldn't repeat the braid. How did the little girl have such braids? Miranda jumped out of the limousine and, taking the little girl aside, asked her quietly, "Sweetie, what's your name? Where are your parents? Don't be afraid, my name is Miranda. Maybe I can help you with something." The little girl replied in a frightened voice, "I'm Savannah. I'm 7 years old and I live with my mum. She's very sick right now. She can hardly get up. And there's no Dad. Mum says he's a polar pilot on a distant expedition, but I don't believe it. I think he just left us. I'm selling these bouquets to collect money for my mum's surgery. I really want her to get better. I love her so much. And I live nearby, the house with a yellow roof on the next street. An excited Miranda promised the girl, "You know what? I'll come to visit you in a couple of days. Can I? I'll get to know your mum. Maybe I can help with something." Savannah nodded. "Okay, Miranda, come visit. I'll be waiting for you." Miranda hugged the little girl warmly and returned to her husband in the limousine. Her heart was restless and uneasy. She thought, what if this is my friend's daughter? Maybe she didn't die. Although, how is that even possible? 100 questions and not a single answer yet. A worried Jason asked, "My dear, what happened? What were you talking about with that little one? You don't seem like yourself." Miranda replied with a trembling voice, "It's a long story, everything later. Perhaps there's even a thread leading to my past, but I don't want to think about it today, on our holiday. Let's go have fun, my love." And she gently kissed her husband. But she worried in vain. Her treat was welcomed with joy and eaten with appetite, praising her. It was so important and very pleasant for Miranda. The wedding was a success, followed by an unforgettable wedding night. For a couple of days, Miranda couldn't stay away from her Jason. She was absolutely happy. But as soon as life returned to its normal course, the girl hurried to visit Savannah as promised. With a racing heart, she called and knocked on the door, but no one opened it. A small, cute dog barked in the yard. A neighbour, an elderly woman, came out and explained everything. "Are you looking for Grace? They took her away in an ambulance yesterday. She's really sick, poor thing, in the 3rd City Hospital." Miranda anxiously asked, "And Savannah, her daughter, where is she?" The elderly woman sighed. "Savannah is with me for now, sleeping. Her mother is dying. She has cancer in the final stage. It seems that the girl will be sent to an orphanage. God forbid something happens to Grace. I feel sorry for both of them. It's as if someone cursed them." "And what is Grace's surname? I want to visit her in the hospital," asked Miranda. "Bowles. And if you go to Grace, take these treats from me," said the woman, and brought out a few apples and pastries. Miranda grabbed the bag and rushed to the hospital. All the way she was worried. Lord, everything is coming together. The woman's name is Grace, just like her friend. But the surname is different, probably from her husband. Could it be her? Poor Savannah, fate is so cruel to the little girl. You can't envy her. How much she loves her mother, collecting every penny to make her well again. A pleasant young nurse was sitting in the reception room. Miranda asked with a trembling voice, "Miss, in which room is Grace Bowles? They brought her to you in an ambulance yesterday. I really need to see her." The nurse indifferently said, "She passed away this morning. The doctors tried to resurrect her, but couldn't save her. Accept our condolences. Are you a relative?" Tears streamed down Miranda's face. She cursed herself. "I'm too late. I didn't get to see my friend. I was too busy with myself." Suddenly she had an idea and asked, "Can I at least say goodbye to her? Just for a few minutes, please. She's my childhood friend. There's no one closer. We haven't seen each other for many years." The nurse allowed it. "We haven't taken the body to the morgue yet. You can stay with her for a few minutes, but not too long, or I'll get in trouble. I'll take you there now." Miranda walked behind the nurse, her legs barely holding her up. The body of a woman lay on a stretcher covered with a sheet. She took a deep breath, crossed herself, and resolutely opened the sheet. And she almost screamed in shock. It wasn't Grace, not her friend. An entirely different face, thin lips and nose, entirely different hair. No, this was definitely not Grace, whom she had known since childhood. Miranda covered the body back up and felt some relief, rejoicing that it wasn't her friend lying here. But then she thought of Savannah, of how the little girl had lost her mother today and doesn't even know it yet. What awaits her? A terrible orphanage. There can't be a worse place. The young nurse said quietly, "I'm so sorry. She was so young and now she's gone. We'll send the body to the morgue now, and then you can take care of the funeral. Will you be taking her personal belongings and documents? Nobody can come to see her at all. That's why I'm asking. I don't know whom to give them to." Miranda swallowed hard. "Yes, I'll take everything, and take care of the funeral." They gave her the deceased's belongings, a watch, a locket, and a small note, everything that was left of the person. Miranda opened it with trembling hands and read, "Savannah, my little daughter, I feel awful. I don't know if I'll live until morning. Whatever happens, remember and know I love you more than anything in the world, more than life itself. You're my only family. Promise me that you'll study well, won't be mischievous, and you'll definitely be the happiest for my sake. Kisses, my little bunny. Your beloved Mum." The girl couldn't remember how she got home. She was shaking, trembling, and tears were flowing non-stop, blurring her vision. The blue face of that woman was still in front of her eyes. Poor Savannah. Miranda was worried about how she would tell her husband everything, as she didn't have enough money for the funeral. Would Jason want to deal with this? In essence, Savannah and the mother were complete strangers to them, but she couldn't just stand aside and isolate herself from the girl's problems. Her conscience wouldn't allow it. To distract herself, Miranda started preparing dinner, but everything kept slipping from her hands. The omelette burned, she cut her finger with a knife and broke a cup. Jason came home late, exhausted and worn out from work that took a lot of time and energy. His wife greeted him tenderly and started feeding him dinner, while still glancing at him and hesitating to start the difficult conversation. But he knew Miranda's character better than anyone else, and immediately understood that something was bothering and saddening her, and he asked first, "My dear, what's wrong with you? You look terrible. I can see that something happened. Don't keep me waiting. Tell me." Miranda exhaled and began to tell. "Do you remember that little girl with braids who sold us a bouquet of daisies at the wedding? Well, even then, I almost fainted when I saw the braids on her hair. Only my friend from the orphanage, Grace, knew how to braid like that. And when I asked Savannah what her mother's name was, and she replied that it was Grace, I was certain that it might be her. Who knows, maybe she didn't die back then. And remember, I told you that they never found the body. And I promised the girl that I would visit her. So I went there today. It turned out that her mother was suffering from cancer and was in the hospital, and the little girl was staying with an elderly neighbour. I ran there, and you won't believe it. They told me that Grace died this morning. And then I asked the nurse to take a look at the body and say goodbye. I pulled back the sheet, and it wasn't her, not my Grace. Then the nurse asked me who would be taking the body, clothes, and organising the funeral. Apparently they have no relatives. I quickly and emotionally said that I would take care of it. And I didn't consult you, and I feel so sorry for Savannah. She's only 7 years old, such a wonderful girl. What awaits her? A children's home. I've been in that hellhole, and I wouldn't wish anyone to end up there. I've been crying all the evening, and I can't do anything. I was afraid to tell you. You might say, why do we need other people's problems and children? You'll probably scold me. Jason listened seriously without interrupting. Then he gently hugged his wife. "Miranda, we've known each other for 6 months. Have I ever scolded you?" "What nonsense are you talking about? The situation is really difficult. The girl's mother died and there's no one to help her. It's a tragedy for a child. Not every adult can handle it. Of course we'll give the woman a decent farewell. We're not in financial distress, and as for the girl, if you like, we can take her into our family and become her guardians. We'll raise the child properly. How about that?" Miranda cried from an excess of emotions and threw herself on her husband's neck, kissing him. "How much I love you, Jason. You have a huge, kind heart. I'll pick up Savannah tomorrow. You don't mind? Let's help her get through her grief together, and then I'll arrange for the funeral and memorial service. I just don't know how to tell the girl that her mother died. I can't bring myself to do it." Jason advised, "Tell her that her mum was transferred to another hospital for long-term treatment, and she'll stay with us for a while, and we'll see how it goes from there." The very next morning, Miranda went to the neighbour's house and whispered quietly to her on the porch, "Grace died yesterday. I'll take care of the funeral. My husband doesn't mind. The memorial service is at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And one more thing. I want to adopt Savannah. I can't let the child end up in an orphanage. Can I take the girl today?" The neighbour burst into tears and crossed herself, shaking her head. "Oh my God, what a tragedy! May Grace rest in peace. She was a good woman, and so young. And why did this calamity befall her? Thank you for everything. I'm old already. I couldn't leave Savannah with me, but it's such a pity. An excellent girl, obedient and clever beyond her years. We'll all come to see Grace off, and we'll contribute what we can to the funeral. But I don't understand why you decided to help this family and worry so much. You're not related to them, are you? It's so strange today. Nowadays people are so cruel. You fall down on the street, God forbid, and they'll just step over you and move on." Miranda sighed and replied, "You see, I am an orphan, grew up in an orphanage and suffered a lot there, so I can't let such a wonderful girl as Savannah end up there. That's all." The neighbour led Miranda into the house, and Savannah was delighted to see her. "Oh, Miranda, you came. I'm so happy, and I'm drawing and helping Mrs. Simmons and waiting for Mum to come home. She'll get better, won't she?" The child looked so intently into Miranda's eyes that everything inside her shrunk and turned inside out. The woman barely managed to hold back the tears that welled up in her throat and began a difficult conversation. "Savannah, my little son, I have some news for you. Your mum was transferred to another hospital today, far away, to the capital. Mrs. Simmons is already old and can't take care of you for long. I would like you to live with our family for a while. I understand that we hardly know each other and it's a little strange, but please believe me, neither I nor my husband will hurt you. We'll love you, play with you, and do everything we can to make you smile. So what do you say? Do you agree?" Savannah looked at Miranda as if she were an adult and said quietly, "Don't treat me like a little kid. You're lying about everything. Mum wasn't transferred anywhere. She died, didn't she? I overheard the doctors talking a long time ago, and I know that Mum was seriously ill. Tell me the truth. I want to say goodbye to her too." Miranda and her neighbour looked helplessly at each other, tears rolling down their faces. Finally, Miranda nodded and handed Savannah a note. "Your mum left it for you. Do you want to read it?" The girl shook her head, but eventually began to whisper the text quietly. With each word, tears ran down her thin, almost transparent cheeks. Savannah reread the note several times, and all the time held onto it like the most precious treasure. The girl dug through her backpack and pulled out an impressive stack of bills and coins. She handed them, trembling, to Miranda and said, "This is what I collected for my mum's surgery.
but she didn't make it. I want you to spend it on her funeral, please. Let her be beautiful." Suddenly Savannah hugged Miranda and burst into tears, no longer restraining herself, processing the terrible truth. They sat like that for a long time, grieving together for the most precious person in the girl's life. The funeral was heavy, with only a few people in attendance, neighbours and a couple of Grace's former colleagues. Miranda did her best to fulfill the girl's request, and Grace lay in the coffin, looking alive, beautifully dressed and covered in flowers. Savannah cried for a long time, saying goodbye to her mum, and didn't allow the coffin to be closed, not wanting to let go of her dearest person to heaven. Miranda did her best to comfort Savannah and was afraid that her psyche would be traumatized for life. But in the end, Savannah hugged Miranda trustingly and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I needed to say goodbye to my mum. I heard you want to adopt me, but why? I'm a stranger to you. Do you just feel sorry for me?" Miranda was amazed by such adult judgments from a 7-year-old child. She was even confused, but didn't lie this time. "Yes, I feel sorry for you. I don't want them to take you to the orphanage. I see that you are a smart and good girl. I think we will get along, and over time you'll be able to love us as parents." Savannah quietly replied, "I will try very hard not to disappoint you and my mum. Thank you, Miranda." So, Savannah began to live with Miranda's family. It wasn't easy at first. There were offences and character clashes. Savannah felt embarrassed and shy and couldn't get used to her new home. She often cried in the evenings and missed her mum, rereading the note. But the adults were patient, didn't pressure the girl, comforted her, and distracted her as best they could. Gradually she accepted and loved Miranda and Jason, as if they were her own. After 6 months, Savannah rushed into Jason's office, joyfully shouting, "Dad, let's go eat! Mum, Miranda baked such a pie! You'll love it!" The man picked up the girl, kissing her cheeks. "I'm coming, my good girl. Just don't take the biggest piece." Jason never regretted his decision to adopt Savannah. Her arrival made the family complete, and they all took care of her. Jason's parents were also understanding and enjoyed taking care of their new granddaughter, amazed by her independence and mature judgment. Miranda and Savannah often visited the cemetery to visit Grace's grave, where they had placed a gravestone. The child sat for a long time on a bench, looking at the photo of her loved one and remembering various stories from her childhood. However, the story with Savannah's braids still troubled Miranda. She felt that there was some secret associated with them, but she couldn't solve it yet. And then, as if by chance, the drowned Grace appeared in her dream. In the dream they sat together on the windowsill, just as they did in childhood, and Grace braided Miranda's hair with the same intricate braiding. Grace said, "Don't worry, my friend. Savannah will tell you where to find me." Miranda woke up in a cold sweat, feeling chills all over her body. The next morning, while getting her daughter ready for school, Miranda asked her cautiously, "Sweetie, did your mum have any friends by any chance? Do you know who taught your mum to braid your hair so beautifully?" The girl nodded her head affirmatively, chewing on a cheese and sausage sandwich. She had a colleague. Her name was Grace. She taught my mum to make all kinds of beautiful hairstyles. Aunt Grace was nice. She always brought me candy. Where does she live? Have you ever visited her? Miranda asked. They put her in jail when I was 6 years old. Aunt Grace worked at a store with my mum, and they said she had stolen a lot of money there, answered the girl. Miranda felt uncomfortable. Did Grace survive and go down the wrong path, resorting to theft? She asked again. So, did Aunt Grace steal that money? What
What did your mother say?" Savannah replied, "Mum said she was not guilty of anything, and the director deliberately accused her. I don't know why, and I never understood it." Miranda's heart sank. She had carried the guilt of Grace's death throughout her childhood and youth, and it was now crucial for her to get to the truth and help her friend if she could. But without Jason's help, she couldn't do it alone. This time, she immediately told her husband everything and asked him for help directly. "I have good acquaintances in the police," Jason replied. "Write me your friend's name, surname, patronymic, year of birth, and maybe he'll check his channels and find out if such a citizen is in jail." Miranda kissed her husband tenderly. "Thank you, dear. You are my magician. I love you." A few days later, Jason brought home the address of the colony where Grace was serving her time. The prison was a 3-day train ride away, and the charge was theft on a large scale. Miranda was trembling with anticipation and disbelief. "Jason, my dear, I must talk to her. Look her in the eye. I just can't believe that Grace is a thief. She couldn't stand theft and injustice in the orphanage. You know, Grace was like a sister to me, even closer. She saved my life. Otherwise I would have been gone long ago." Jason kissed his wife on the head and hugged her. "I anticipated this, so acquaintances promised to arrange a meeting. You'll go talk to your friend and find out everything. If she's innocent, we'll help however we can." Miranda squealed with joy. "My darling, thank you for understanding me." 2 weeks later, Miranda entrusted Mrs. Simmons with looking after Savannah during the day, bringing her home from school and feeding her. Meanwhile, she set out to see her dear friend Grace, whom she thought was dead. "You have 2 hours. Time's up," said the guard, and Miranda finally saw her friend. She barely recognized her in this tortured, emaciated, tall woman. Grace's once cheerful blue eyes were now detached and lifeless. But when Grace saw Miranda in front of her, she immediately recognized her, smiled joyfully, and rushed to hug her. For the first 10 minutes, they just cried and hugged, and then they couldn't stop talking. Miranda was in shock. "Grace, my God, I thought you died then. They declared you drowned. There were funerals. I mourned so much, blamed myself for your death. How happy I am that you are alive. Tell me everything." Grace sighed and began to tell her story. "I couldn't swim out then. I only managed to push you out, and I ran out of strength myself. The current carried me down a kilometre. I must have lost consciousness, because I woke up already at home. I was lying in bed, unable to understand anything. I had a cough. It choked me. I could hardly breathe, and I felt so bad. It turned out that I was saved by an elderly fisherman who resurrected me and brought me to his home. He lived in an almost abandoned village with his wife. Many years ago, their little daughter drowned and they had no more children, so they decided not to give me away. They believed that the Lord sent me to them for comfort in their old age. I was sick for a long time, and they took care of me, treating me with herbs, decoction, steam baths. Gradually, I recovered and stayed with them. They were good, kind people who sincerely loved me, and I gradually got used to them. I helped them in the garden and around the house, and finished rural school. Then I went to the city to find a job. Without education and experience, I couldn't get anywhere, but I managed to find a job in a store. My partner was a good person, also named Grace like me. She taught me everything, and we became friends. But the owner of the store had his eye on me and made repeated hints of intimacy. He was a very unpleasant person, and I refused him. Then Bruce began threatening me, saying that if I didn't become more compliant, he would cause big trouble for me. I should have quit quietly while I still could, but I didn't take his threat seriously, and then, during my shift, all the money for the week disappeared without a trace from the cash register. Bruce called me a thief, called the police, and all that money was found in my bag. But I didn't take it, I swear. You know me. I won't take what belongs to others. I was sentenced to 2 years in court. It was such a blow to me, such a shame. I was shamelessly slandered. No matter how much I protested my innocence, no one was listening to me. Bruce simply framed me, but I couldn't prove it. I've already served a year for nothing, but I'm losing strength. I'm so apathetic I don't even want to live. This place is such a hell that life in an orphanage seems sweeter than honey. What's next? Who will need me with the stigma of a prisoner for life? And the most annoying thing is that one worthless scoundrel ruined my whole life and got away with it. He lives his life while I suffer. Miranda couldn't take it and started crying, hugging her friend again. Grace, don't talk like that. I need you. Aren't we sisters? We can review the case, reduce the sentence. I won't abandon you. I'll support you. Don't even dare to be melancholic. You're not alone now. I'll ask Jason to help again. He's a golden husband. He won't refuse. Grace suddenly asked, "Thank you, my friend, but how did you even find me?" Miranda laughed and replied, "Your braids helped me. I had just gotten married when a little girl named Savannah sold me a bouquet of daisies. Her mother's name was Grace, and I saw the braiding in her hair. It hit me like a bolt of lightning. Only you could braid like that, no one else. At first, I thought you were her mother, but I was wrong. Unfortunately, the woman died of cancer. I adopted Savannah, but your braids were still bothering me, so I slowly asked the little girl if her mother had any friends, and that's how I found out about you. Savannah told me you worked with her mother in a store, and then you were sent to prison. I never doubted for a minute that you were innocent because I know your character well, and I know that no matter how difficult things get, you wouldn't steal. So I asked my husband through his acquaintances to find out where you were serving your sentence. He understood everything and even arranged a meeting for us." Grace was shocked and burst into tears, saying, "My poor colleague, I feel so sorry for her, such a young and good woman. You are great for not abandoning her daughter. I remember her well. I loved playing with her, and your husband seems to be a good man, since he agreed to raise someone else's child as his own. I am happy for you, Miranda, that your fate turned out well, unlike mine. I'm poor, I don't have love nor a normal life, and it seems like it will never happen." Grace started crying again on her best friend's shoulder. Miranda comforted her. "Come on, what are you talking about? You're still young. When you get out, I'll help you. Everything will be fine, you'll see. You need to believe in good things, and don't think about revenge. Fate will punish that scoundrel. Bruce, anyway, you'll see. Just hold out a little longer, and I'll definitely get you out of here." They said warm goodbyes, and Miranda went home determined to help Grace no matter what. And once again, loyal knight Jason did not disappoint. Grace's case was reviewed, and it turned out that she was not the first person that Bruce had framed. There were other victims who refused to be near the shady businessman. They also managed to find the elderly cleaner who had accidentally seen Bruce putting money in Grace's purse. The elderly woman was afraid of losing her job at the time and kept quiet, but the lawyer managed to persuade her to testify against Bruce, especially since she was already retired and had nothing to lose. After a second hearing, the woman was acquitted and released early, and her conviction was annulled. It was the happiest day in the lives of both girlfriends. Miranda prepared a warm welcome for Grace. Savannah was also thrilled, expressing her love for the guest by showing her collection of Smurfs and talking about her successes at school. Grace was given a huge bath towel and a lavender-scented terry robe by her friend, then taken to the shower and shown her room. The poor woman spent an hour
washing away all her troubles and misfortunes in hot water, and could not be happier. When her head touched the silk pillow, the woman immediately fell into a sweet, peaceful sleep. She had never slept like this during her long stay in the walls of the jail. Grace was incredibly grateful to Miranda for finding her, supporting her, bringing her into the family, and welcoming her so warmly. Watching how Miranda and Jason loved and respected each other with Jason, and how easy and cozy their family atmosphere was, Grace sighed dreamily. If only I could meet such a golden man who would love, cherish, and pamper me. Jason took Savannah into his company as a manager and rented a small cozy apartment for her not far from their house. The woman was incredibly grateful to Miranda and her family for their help and support during the most difficult moment of her life. Soon, Grace's personal life improved. At work, she met Stephen, who worked as a programmer in the same office. At first, the guy, like everyone else, kept his distance from Grace, as she was the boss's protégé. But when he came to set up her computer, they got to know each other better. Stephen really liked Grace. She was tall, had pretty blonde hair, and her blue, bottomless eyes were beckoning. But the short, unremarkable, bespectacled Stephen did not impress Grace at all, and she simply became friends with him. They often drank coffee, shared secrets, and chatted about this and that. The guy frequently complimented her and was always ready to help, including with repairs in her apartment and fixing her computer. He hoped that Grace would appreciate his efforts and understand that he liked her madly. However, the girl did not notice Stephen as a potential partner and only saw him as a friend. Several months passed, and Jason, Miranda's husband, had his birthday party at a restaurant with many guests, mostly families and couples. Grace took Stephen with her so as not to be alone. The guy carefully prepared himself, dressed up in a suit and tie, and proudly walked into the restaurant hand in hand with Grace. The woman, on the other hand, was a bit self-conscious, since Stephen was half a head shorter than her, and she hurried to sit down at the table. The fun was in full swing, with Stephen inviting Grace to all the slow dances and courting her with all his might, being gallant and polite. He was simply thrilled with his blue-eyed companion, who looked like a beautiful fairy in a flowing chiffon dress and elegant, high-heeled shoes. Miranda, who was covertly watching all the guests, couldn't resist and approached her friend with a glass of champagne, whispering in her ear, "Congratulations! Do you finally have a suitor? Why do I know nothing about him?" "Who, Stephen?" asked Grace in surprise. "What kind of suitor is he? He's just a friend of mine." Miranda shook her head. "You're wrong, girlfriend. It's obvious that Stephen has a crush on you. Jason told me about him. He's a valuable and promising employee, and he's a good person. So take a closer look, or you'll miss your chance for happiness." They raised their glasses to the birthday boy's health, and Miranda went back to her husband's table. Meanwhile, after her friend's words, Grace took a closer look at Stephen, smiled at him, winked, and pulled him onto the dance floor for a dance. It turned out that he moved excellently, and soon they both became hot and stuffy, so they each drank a glass of mineral water and went outside to breathe some fresh air and cool down a bit. "Wow, Stephen, you're astonishing. You dance so well. I have never had so much fun before," said amazed Grace. The man had already had quite a bit to drink, so he became bold and suddenly pulled Grace towards him and kissed her eagerly. "Not only can I dance well, but I also know how to cook and give massages. So marry me, Grace. I'll be the most faithful and devoted. I can't live without you. You're like an obsession, like a star in the sky. You settled in my heart from the first moment I saw you. Do you not like me at all?" Grace was stunned. Her head was spinning.
She didn't even suspect that the man was in love with her. It was incredibly pleasant for her, and she decisively replied, "Kiss me again, otherwise I'm uncertain if I understood everything correctly." Stephen, overjoyed, scooped the girl up in his arms, and they started kissing passionately. Then, to dispel the last doubts, Grace asked a delicate and important question. "What if I tell you that I'm a former inmate? I spent a year in prison for something I didn't do. I'm also an orphan with no family or kin. Do you still love me? Also, I'm not sure if I can have a baby for you. I caught a severe cold in the jail and we barely survived. Plus, I've never been with a man." Stephen listened attentively and replied, "Even if you had 5 children, I would love them as my own. I don't care about your past. I want to make sure you have a happy future with me. Love is either there or it's not. You don't love someone for something. It's a gift from God." Grace was relieved, and the couple started dating. Stephen enveloped her with such care, love, tenderness, and affection that she quickly forgot about his glasses and short stature, and saw in him the best, most beloved and reliable man in the world. A week later, the couple filed an application with the registry office, and 2 months later, they got married. Soon after this, Grace became pregnant. One day, Stephen and Jason were having lunch together. "Jason, may I congratulate you on expecting a baby?" Jason objected. "Why do you think so?" "Of course I would be happy. But unfortunately nothing has happened yet. Thank goodness we have Savannah." Stephen replied, "Don't you see how your wife has changed? She has noticeably rounded and become more beautiful, almost unrecognizable. Maybe I'm wrong, but she looks so much like a pregnant woman." Jason paused and suddenly realized that Miranda had indeed changed lately. She had become sleepy and absent-minded, falling asleep on the go. All of this was strange. His wife had gained a little weight, but he even liked it, as she was even more attractive and appetizing than before. That same night, Jason couldn't take it any more and asked Miranda directly, "Darling, are you pregnant by any chance? You've changed so much lately." Miranda laughed cheerfully. "Well, you can't hide anything from you. You spoiled the surprise. Yes, I'm also pregnant. My best friend and I managed to get pregnant almost at the same time, without even planning it. It's some kind of miracle. But Grace and I wanted to go for an ultrasound together first, and then I would have told you myself. Do you want to come with us?" Jason jumped up on the bed, wide awake. He started hugging and kissing Miranda, saying, "My good girl, finally God gave us a baby. I've been dreaming about it so much. Make sure not to overwork yourself and get plenty of rest and vitamins. Of course I'll go with you. What are you talking about?" Jason's dream came true. Miranda was expecting a boy, just like her best friend Grace. Their due dates were almost the same. This made the women pleased because their children would grow up together, socialize and be friends. The only thing left was to tell Savannah the news without making her jealous or upset. The 4 adults spent a whole day brainstorming and rehearsing how to break the news, each speech worse than the last. Finally, when the girl came home from school and had lunch, Miranda and Jason took a deep breath and decided to talk to her. "Sweetheart, Daddy and I want to tell you something important. Be honest, would you like to have a little brother or sister? It would be great, right? We could all bathe the baby and play with him. You will always be our beloved daughter. Remember that. We won't love you any less, don't worry." Savannah exhaled and as always responded seriously like an adult. "Well, you're just like little kids. Don't worry so much, I'm not upset. On the contrary, I am happy that I'll be able to play with a real baby doll, not a fake one. Besides, I'm the older sister, so the baby will listen to me. Just don't let him misbehave too much. I know how those boys can be." Jason laughed heartily, picked Savannah up and hugged her. "Oh, our daughter is growing up so smart beyond her years. The baby will have a great role model. I have an important mission for you. Watch over Mummy while I'm not at home. Make sure she doesn't do any heavy lifting. She needs to take care of herself now. And on the weekend, we'll go to the countryside with Grace and Stephen. We'll swim, sunbathe, and grill delicious kebabs. I promised to teach you how to bake potatoes on coals, didn't I?" Savannah shouted, "Hooray!" and started to have fun and run around the room. All her seriousness vanished instantly. So, by chance and fate, the best friends who seemed to have been torn apart forever were reunited again. Both women cherished their friendship very much and were always ready to help each other. As for the scoundrel Bruce, fate finally caught up with him. First he took Grace's place in jail, and when he was released, his business had long been destroyed by competitors, and he had to spend the rest of his life in a smoky room, working as an ordinary janitor. After all, the man got exactly what he deserved.